Well, good morning, everybody. It's Tom Christie back in the Decoy carving shop and going to start a new project. I always try to not duplicate the content that I'm putting on the channel and show you 5 different times I carve a mallard drake, for instance. But this is a unique one. This is a Surf Scoter Drake. I've only carved one other Surf Scoter Drake, and I carved one for my World Rig one year, long time ago. But it's a beautiful, striking bird. Thankfully, I have a great study bill. I'm going to carve this in open bill position with a muscle in the bill. So I thought that would make for some interesting carving that you haven't seen before. And if you want to try a surf scoter, I've got this great study bill. We'll take a close-up look at. There's some really unique geometry in the bill of a surf scoter. So we're going to want to try to duplicate that faithfully, and we'll see what happens. But welcome back. I'm glad you're back. If you're enjoying my channel and getting value out of it, please hit the subscribe button. That does help me out. It's totally free. I'll keep it that way, but it is a show of support for the channel as we continue to grow this channel with resources for people that want to carve wildfowl of any kind, really. Let's get going. All right, let's take a look at this study bill first, since it is a very unique shape. Give you a view from the top down, wide bill, angled at the nail. The nail is really large for going after those muscles that we're going to carve a muscle in the bill here. The nostrils are typical diver nostrils, wide set and kind of in a vertical orientation, but you can see the nostrils are huge on the Surf Scoter. And then we have these lobes back here, and I'm sure they can change in dimension somewhat over the various seasons, but I'm going to use the study bill dimensions and carve it just as close to this one as I can get. There's the tongue and the open bill, and I went ahead and I've got my patterns made top down and side profile, and I went ahead and cut out the bird on the bandsaw in both directions, the side profile and the top down profile. So now we'll do some layout work. Little different approach on this since I have a profile cut from the side and top down. So I've already got my bill pretty close to dimensions, and I cut out the bill profile from my pattern and placed it on here, and then traced around that to get a location for the carving I'm going to need to do there, and then also use that and just use an X-Acto to poke through and give me guidelines on the lower edge of the upper mandible here and how far it comes back. And then I'm using my study bill to get a dimension. You can see this V-notch is really unusual. It's wide open and it comes pretty far forward on the bill. That's very unique to this particular bird. So I've got a dimension with my dividers from the tip of the bill to the tip of the notch there. And then I can use that to sketch in where I'm going to want to carve that in. And again, I'll get dimensions on the width, pencil that in here. I also got dimensions off the lower mandible, transferred those to the wood here, so I have a guideline on the width of that lower mandible as I start removing wood here. All right, I want one more dimension here, and that's the width across the widest part of the lobes. And I want to pencil that in on my carving because I've got excess material here. So I'll get a dimension there. It looks like it's 1.25 inches. So give myself a guideline. Close, but we'll take a little bit of wood off here. as we form those lobes. Okay, I've got the bottom, side profile, the top down. Now we can start some carving. Seems like there's always one more dimension that I missed, but the width of the crown is 1 3/8. And so I've penciled in the cheek, kind of through the eye there, and the crown width as it leads into this V notch and then tapers off back here. Now we're ready. Seems like there's always one more dimension that I missed, but the width of the crown is 1 3/8. And so I've penciled in the cheek, kind of through the eye there, and the crown width as it leads into this V notch and then tapers off back here. Now we're ready. I'm going to start carving with this 1/4" burr, and since I haven't done a lot of these, I'm going to approach this very cautiously. I think I want to take material out here to begin with, to begin to define where the feathers of the head come down and meet the bill. And it's quite far forward on a surf scoter. So I'm using the edge of this burr, and I'm going to create a shelf here and begin to form that V shape on the top of the head as it meets the bill. Just as a place to start, because you could start a lot of different places here. Again, I'm going to figure this out as I go, and that's a lot of what carving is about. So I don't have a tried and true process for a surf scoter head. I'm going to keep this at normal speed to begin with. We'll probably speed it up a little later, but using a burr, I just want you to see the carving speed. I'm going to go against the grain here, and I've mentioned this before. You really have to be delicate with your touch as you drive a burr like this against the grain, and just take your time. If you dig too deep, it'll chatter and jump. So forming the V shape on top first, and that'll give us a starting point. And I'm taking that down to the side profile that I've drawn on the side of the shape of the bill as it meets the face there. Okay, let's take a quick look at this before we move on. So you can see that ridge and the feathers of the crown here as they meet the bill. I'm going to round these to the center line. Keep my center line intact. All right, we've got that shaped up as a beginning point. Now I want to begin to define the form of the bill as it meets the face here. I'm going to start by relieving the lower mandible here and removing wood because it's more narrow than that upper mandible. And I'm using that knife line for a nice clean line, and I'm going down to meet that pencil mark on the lower mandible that I just showed there. So I'm going to work to meet that pencil line, and as the lower mandible wraps under the upper mandible here in front, I'm going to round the front a little bit where the tongue would lie in there. So I've met that line underneath. Now I'm going to do the same thing on this side, and then I'll come back. Now I'm going to switch to a little flame-shaped ruby and use that to get in here and shape up the lower mandible a little bit where the tongue lies in here, and just round that. I am going to insert that muscle later, so I'm not going to have a lot of detail on this lower mandible, just on the sides primarily. And this little flame shape allows me to get in here and peel out some material, begin to form that lower mandible. Now, since I've removed wood, I need to go back to my pattern and re-pencil in. I want to keep these lines in front of me at all times, and you'll see me do this several times. As we begin to take wood out, I'm going to have to reestablish where the bill meets the face here and make sure I keep that in front of me. Now I'm going to switch, I think, to the little 1/4 inch burr again, and very carefully begin to remove material from this lower mandible as it meets the chin underneath. It raises up here and forms a V under here, and I use my reference for the length of that V, so I know exactly how far it goes up under the lower mandible there. Do the same thing on this side. I'm just going to relieve a little wood here, and that'll cast a little bit of a shadow in that chin area underneath. This is at normal speed again. Just cleaning up some of the tooling marks on that lower mandible. And then I'm going to work to define this V a little more and take off the bandsaw marks on the lower mandible here. Just remove a little bit of this wood as the lower mandible meets the face down here. We don't want it to be too wide. Now I want to define the bill as it meets the face here on both sides, and I'm going to switch to a little 1/8 inch cylindrical ruby bit. And that bit has grit on the end of it as well, so it's good for this purpose. I'm just going to kind of outline where the bill meets the face here to begin to establish that. And down here in the corner, the rictus where the upper and lower mandible meet, I'm going to carve in a little bit of flesh around that area, so I want to leave wood. Starting to take material out here. Again, I'm going at this very slowly, so I'll speed it up here a little bit. All right, this is at 2 times speed just to get through this a little quicker. But you can see I'm following my pencil lines and really establishing in the wood now where I want that bill to meet the face and maintain those shapes. I'm just using that same bit to kind of clean things up there. All right, back to normal speed. I'm going to switch back to the cylindrical burr. And I'm going to use that because I need to take quite a bit of wood out here to define the edge of these lobes as they meet the face and round those. And then I'm going to begin to round the upper mandible here a bit. I'll reiterate, I'm always keeping the center line intact so I don't lose the pattern. Probably tired of hearing me say that, but I think it's so important to maintain the nice clean profile that really is characteristic of the species. So you can see these lobes bulge out and then narrows down here at the bridge where the nostrils are formed. So I need to begin to form this kind of rounded lobe area. And the upper mandible actually gets more narrow down here, so I'm going to take material out on the lower edge of that mandible as it meets the face. So I'm going to get a dimension and get that carved in accurately. Get my calipers, and I'm still too wide down here on this upper mandible, so I need to take that down even more. So I'll work that down until I hit the dimension I'm looking for, and that's going to help us form that lobe shape on the upper part of the bill as it meets the face. We'll cast a little shadow down here under the lobe, which is important to the way the bird projects. I'm going to speed the video up here. I'm just taking that width dimension on the upper mandible back into the face so that it carries back in there, and then using this to round the upper mandible. Got to round this area leading up to the nail. Now I think we'll stop, take a look, do some more layout work. All right, I want to go at this very slowly because I'm not experienced carving these shapes on the Surf Scoter bill. So I've got a general start here. Things are kind of very roughly shaped up. Now I want to begin to form, you can see there's a ridge across here that kind of tucks back into the lobes. And I need to get a dimension there. It looks like it's pretty consistently a 1/2 inch across. So I want to mark that on my carving. I'm trying to stay out of camera here, but that's difficult to do. So I apologize if the videography is not the greatest. So I'm marking a 1/2 inch around the center line there. So we're going to want to leave that ridge high and leave our center line intact so that we have that side profile maintained. And we're going to take some material out. If you look at it from the side, this lobe starts here, angles down under the nostril to form kind of a teardrop shape. So we're going to want to do the same thing, and we'll get a dimension on how low to go there, but we're going to take material out of here on both sides. I'm still wide down here, but I mentioned I want to go at this slowly, and you'll notice I keep going back to the pattern as I remove more wood and repenciling the shape so that we don't lose this distinctive shape we're trying to form here as we remove wood. Okay, so I'll go back to the carving bench, take some of this material out. Probably be a good idea to get a dimension here on the lower. How low does this go under the nostril to the lower edge of the upper mandible? just as a reference dimension. So again, from the lower edge of the upper mandible to the lower edge of the nostril. And I can just give myself a guideline. You can see that that goes quite low, and I've penciled it in way up here. So I'm going to want to take that lower. Okay. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Just kind of rough sketching things in. So that gives me a guideline on, as I remove this wood, how low do I need to go there. All right. I'm going to use my trusty 1/4-inch cylindrical burr to very slowly remove wood and maintain that 1/2 inch across the bridge of the nostrils, but begin to scoop out material here as we come off the lobe and down under the nostril area. I'm going to run this at normal speed for now. We may speed it up later, but again, with burr carving, I want you to see the actual speed I'm going. So I've got a start there. Now I'm going to flip it around and take material off down here and begin to form the front edge of the lobes there. Just going at this slowly and taking that down. And then as this goes to the nail up here, I can begin to round the nail area in this location. Round that ridge. Now I'm going against the grain here with my burr, so I'm going to even go slower, pulling in this direction, and just peel wood out of this area. I will speed it up here, just so we get through this a little quicker. Okay, 2 times speed. I'm just working on the other side here, and again, rounding into that lobe area and up here into the nail. And beginning to shape up the upper mandible here, and then a little bit of roundness to the ridge up here, but I don't want to lose any width as I'm carving on that ridge. All right, I'm finishing up the rough carving with the burr here. Now I want to do some reference checks again on this dimension of this nostril location from the lower edge of the mandible. I'm roughly where I want to be there. I'm taking that a little bit lower. That looks about right. Make sure we've got symmetry side to side, so I need to go a little lower on this side. And forming that upper mandible shape. And you can see the bridge between the nostrils is starting to shape up there now. All right, let's stop, take a look at the pattern again. I want to make sure I don't lose this profile where the bill meets the face. So I'm going to get my pattern. And I've mentioned that before. As you continue to remove wood, I want to keep the pattern close by and re-pencil in where the bill meets the face, because there's a lot going on here, especially in an open bill like this, that we want to make sure we carve in. Now I want to check my dimension here on the lower mandible and where the lower and upper mandible meet to get a proper width off of the study bill and see where I am. It looks like I'm still a little wide here, so I want to go back to my 1/4 inch burr, take material out of this area, and narrow this lower mandible up a little bit, including the lower edge of the upper mandible here. I want to take that down to the proper dimension. I can round this throat area, and you can see I'm beginning to form the junction there between the lower and upper mandible and the face. So I can round this off in the throat area and blend this area into the mandibles. Keep working to define that junction. Go back to my pencil. Make sure I keep those shapes in front of me. I'll keep working this and refining it until I get it right. Okay, I've got the bill rough carved now, and I want to narrow the crown area here. So I've penciled in the width of the crown and the cheek, and I'm going to use this 3/4 inch diameter round-nosed saber-tooth burr and very carefully begin removing material to narrow the crown and blend that into the bill. I'm not going to have to take too much off in this stretched forward head position. The cheeks aren't bulged out too much. They're kind of thinned up because he's stretched out there. So the crown is definitely smaller across, but not too much. So I'm working to define that cheek area. Take it right through the eye and then right up to the bill where it meets the face. And I normally, if you've watched my other videos, you know this, I normally set the crown width before I start rounding things off. I just want to make sure I've got symmetry on both sides before I round the crown. And I also like to set the eye width before I round that crown. So now I can round some of these lower areas of the bird. I needed to flip that around because my burr started chattering. I was pulling against the grain, so this is a better approach in this area. I'm going to flip that around again, by the way, when I get back to that corner where the neck is squared back there, because I want to pull off the back of the neck and not pull into that squared area. I'll show you what I mean here in a second. I'm working the other side in similar fashion, and I'll speed this up. Okay, I'm going at 2 times speed here now just to get through this more quickly, but let you see all of the carving. This is what I was talking about earlier. As I'm working on that back edge, I want to pull in this direction so the rotation is coming smoothly off the back, and the rotation of the burr is not catching that sharp edge. These are things you learn through experience. just rounding things off now. Make a nice, pleasing shape. You can see I flipped it around there again to get the back area of the neck. I can do a little bit of rounding here on the front of the crown, but I want to set the eye width before I do a full rounding of the crown. Let's check that eye width now. All right, I've got my calipers. I know how wide I want the eyes based on reference material that I have. And so you can see the caliper didn't slide back to the eyes opening. So I need to create a little bit of a groove here to set those eyes. And I'm going to change bits and go with more of a cone-shaped ruby bit for this purpose. And I'm going to cut a groove here carefully right through the eye up to the bill, and then round that up to the crown and down to the cheek. And I know from my caliper dimensions I don't have to go very deep here, especially, as I said, in this stretched out position where everything is kind of, the feathers are tightened up. There's not going to be a deep groove here for the eye set. So I'm just carefully rounding that up to where the bill meets the face and kind of forming the cheek as we go, and then rounding from the bottom of the groove up to the side of the crown. Let's check that out. I've still got some, I need to pull those in a little bit more, so I'll work on that and then come back. Okay, I've got my eyes at the proper depth now. Now I can round the crown. And I want this to be a nice rounded shape. I don't want to leave a hard edge here. But I also have to be careful I don't lose my profile. So I'm going to keep the center line intact. And I want to make sure I don't narrow the crown anymore as I'm rounding it. And now I can finish rounding the crown and the neck back here as it approaches the body of the bird. And I've penciled in a round shape on the neck there so I know exactly how deep to go. I'll speed this up a little bit. Okay, we're at 2 times speed. I'm just finishing the rounding process here with the burr. And then I'll switch to the 1/2-inch sanding drum and sand everything to remove all the burr marks. Finish things up. All right, everybody. I think that's a good place to knock off session 1. I've got to stop for the day anyway. We've got the head roughed out. And just know that I'm not going to include every grinding stroke that I make, put you to sleep, but I'll spend time with my calipers and taking dimensions and just refining that rough shape bill down to the actual dimensions of the study cast that I'm using so that I know that's right. And I'll do some sanding on the head. But in the next session, we'll do that refinement that I talked about. We'll add the details to the bill, get the eyes installed. Until then, Tom Christie signing out. Have a good carving day.